Many people look back at the 2006 NBA MVP with controversy. The award ultimately went to Steve Nash, but did he really deserve it? In this video, we're going to use data and technology to break down and analyze if there are legitimate reasons to doubt that Steve Nash should have won the 2006 MVP award. The first person that a lot of people mention when it comes to the 2006 MVP award is Kobe Bryant. Many fans look back at this season and think that Kobe Bryant may have been robbed of this award. While he did put up some incredible numbers, the argument for his MVP case is actually quite weak for this year. He averaged 35 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 4.5 assists, but his team wasn't even mediocre. They did make the playoffs with a record of 45 and 37, but they lost in the first round in 7 games to, guess who? Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns. Historically, in order for an NBA player to win the MVP, they must be on a good team, at least a team that the media sees as a contender or a potential contender for the championship. And the truth of the matter is that the Los Angeles Lakers were not a contender in any stretch of the imagination. The only reason they made the playoffs at all was from Kobe Bryant. There's a lot of debate on how much the team's success depends on getting the MVP. But if we're going to be objective here, historically that has always been the case, for the most part. So the real question that we will analyze in this setting is whether or not the runner-up to Steve Nash might have deserved the award over Steve Nash. And the runner-up in the 2006 MVP race was LeBron James. Unlike Kobe Bryant, LeBron James did have a good team. The Cleveland Cavaliers were 6th in the entire NBA with a record of 50 and 32, with an offensive rating of 107.8 and a defensive rating of 105.4. Leading the team was LeBron James, who averaged 31.4 points, 7.0 total rebounds, 6.6 assists, 1.6 steals, 0.8 blocks, and 3.3 turnovers. He also shot 52% from inside the arc and 34% from 3. His team consisted of Ronald Murray, Larry Hughes, Ilgauskas, Eric Snow, Drew Gooden, Donyell Marshall, Anderson Varejao, and, well, you get the picture. This was not a very good team, and yet they were 6th in the entire NBA, and he was putting up those incredible numbers. So LeBron James had a pretty good case here. He was putting up the numbers, and his team was good enough that you could possibly justify him getting the MVP. But how does he compare to Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns? Well, the Phoenix Suns were a better team this year, winning 54 games and losing only 28. Pretty comparable, but it did give them 4th place overall in the entire NBA. And they had an outstanding offensive rating at 111.5 and a defensive rating of 105.8. This year was of particular note because Steve Nash had to take a bigger role given that their star and highest scorer Amari Stoudemire got injured early on in the season, and many thought that this would highly impact the team. However, the Suns seemed to pick up right where they left off even without Amari Stoudemire, and they were able to win 54 games under Mike D'Antoni. Steve Nash was the leader of the team, and here's how he performed. He averaged 18.8 points per game with 4.2 total rebounds, 10.5 assists, 0.8 steals, 0.2 blocks, and 3.5 turnovers. He shot 55% for 2-pointers and an incredible 44% from 3, while hitting 92% of his free throws. So Steve Nash here was in the 50-40-90 club, which is incredible to say the least. Hardly any players in NBA history have ever been able to be in the 50-40-90 club, and Steve Nash was this year, even without Amari Stoudemire. For the media voters in 2006, they have to base everything they know on what they saw in the regular season. For us, we get the benefit of looking retrospectively, and they always say, retrospect is 2020. What we can look at is how these players actually performed in the NBA playoffs, because in a lot of ways the playoffs can act as validation or repudiation of the MVP that they selected. So how did these players do in the playoffs? Let's start with Steve Nash. He averaged 20.4 points per game, 10.2 assists, and 3.7 total rebounds. He also was unable to keep up his 50-40-90 stats, shooting 50% field goals, but his 3-point percentage dropped to 37%. As we mentioned before, his team would beat the Los Angeles Lakers in 7 games in the first round. In the second round, they also won, this time in 7 games again, to the Los Angeles Clippers. And finally, they would eventually lose to the Dallas Mavericks 2-4. Let's look at LeBron James. LeBron James in the playoffs averaged 30.8 points per game, 8.1 total rebounds, 5.8 assists, 1.4 steals, 0.7 blocks, and 5 turnovers. He would keep up almost the same shooting percentages that he had in the regular season in the playoffs, and he played almost 47 minutes per game, which is ridiculous to think about. His Cleveland Cavaliers would win in 6 games against the Washington Wizards in the first round, and would eventually lose to the Detroit Pistons in 7 games in the second round. So clearly, Steve Nash made it a little bit further in the playoffs, but neither player went as far as getting to the championship. Now, this channel does use a lot of data and technology to help us understand the NBA better, and machine learning and artificial intelligence does have something to say about the MVP in this year. The artificial intelligence suggests that LeBron James should have won the MVP over Steve Nash in this year. The way that the artificial intelligence determines this is by analyzing the voting patterns of the media in all other MVPs, and it turns out that the difference in their team success was close enough that LeBron James should have won the MVP because of his stats. Now, his stats that you can look at are his total rebounds and points. Now, of course, these stats are based off of the regular season. In the regular season, LeBron James averaged more points, more total rebounds, more steals, and more blocks with fewer turnovers than Steve Nash. Steve Nash averaged more assists, but one of the things of note is how good of a shooter he was during the regular season. Once again, Steve Nash was in the 50-40-90 club, meaning he shot 50% from the field, over 40% from 3, and over 90% at the charity stripe. So we know that the AI says that LeBron James should have won. And to be honest, this is a difficult one to decide. The fact that Steve Nash averaged 50-40-90 in a year where Amari Stoudemire was injured the entire time makes you understand why the media voted him as the MVP instead of a young LeBron James. At the same time, LeBron James, you saw the roster that he had on his team, and yet he was able to put up such incredible numbers. It's obvious that the fact that Stoudemire got injured was a major selling point for the media. The media loves stories. They love the storyline, and that's a great storyline. Steve Nash, in a year where they were expected to do worse because one of their stars had been injured, was able to pull off an incredible season and put up ridiculous numbers. But if we're looking at this as objective as possible and ignoring the storylines, you can definitely argue that LeBron James is a great case. In fact, because the team stats were so close to each other, I think I would slightly lean, and this is difficult for me to say, that LeBron James should have won the MVP that year. I don't know. I understand why Steve Nash won it. I guess that's the main takeaway, that at the end of the day, there are some reasonable objections to Steve Nash winning the MVP in 2006, but they're not as questionable as you may think, and for me, the reason is because he pulled off the 50-40-90. I think for that reason, with his team success, it's not unreasonable at all to say that Steve Nash deserved the MVP. The takeaway here is that I can see it both ways, but my real question is, what do you think? Do you think LeBron James was robbed the MVP in 2006? What about Kobe Bryant? Did his team success not really matter, and the fact that he averaged 35 points per game enough? Should he have won an MVP? It is somewhat ridiculous to think that he's only ever won one MVP. Let me know. I would love to hear. Obviously, I'm pretty torn on this one, but thank you so much for watching, and please consider subscribing for more content.